With the MCU failing so spectacularly, instead of looking forward at MCU's roadmap of what's coming out and trying to get hyped about something, because there's not much there interesting me, to be honest. So let's look back in the past instead, and I've picked out a movie that I absolutely adored, and in my head was just a great movie.
Extraordinary gentleman indeed.
Whether that was nostalgia, rose-tinted glasses, or just my naive, childish mind at the time loving this movie, I went and rewatched it. And that movie was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And let's just say very quickly, this movie fucking holds up in a lot of different ways. If you've not seen this movie, first, why? But secondly, let me just briefly touch on it. It is a comic book movie, which I didn't understand at the time. I just thought it was a great action movie with a lot of colourful characters. But looking at it now for this video, it was based on a comic run where they brought in literary characters together to create their own kind of Justice League. Because watching the movie now as an adult and seeing all these characters and all the references they're making, it's a pretty big universe. You wouldn't imagine that it would all mix well together, but fuck me, they are onto something, and I want more from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I understand why there's not a sequel, because this movie, its production was a shit show. How bad? So much so that Sean Connery stopped acting. He's out the game because of this movie. I think he did a couple of voice roles afterwards, but this was his final farewell, and he said he's retiring after it, and he fucking stuck to it. So I don't know the full ins and outs of behind the scenes of this movie, but if it's going to cause Sean Connery to just stop acting after a huge career, shit has to be bad. Apparently he only took on the role because he's declined various offers to be like Gandalf in these huge roles that got a lot of money. So when this came through his letterbox, he said yes, he wanted to jump on it and not miss another opportunity. I just wanted more from this universe. All these characters, as I said, they are from literature and stories way back, and someone's great idea, that wasn't sarcasm believe it or not, was to bring them together and create this universe.
Extraordinary gentleman indeed.
You've got Alan Quatermain. He is a sharpshooter, the best of the best, and he was blessed by a witch doctor and is not allowed to die on African soil. That's his whole shtick. You've got Captain Nemo in this movie. He is man of the seas, you know him, and his depiction here is fucking awesome. You've got the Invisible Man, well, not the Invisible Man for copyright, but you've got an Invisible Man, which, again, was great to see. Well, when you could see him anyway. He was great to hear for most of the movie. You've got Tom Sawyer as the young American here, which to be fair, he was put in this movie as production said they needed a young American in the film. Someone that was going to be just that young one to draw in a bit more attraction. And surprisingly, as much as that was his reason in the movie, it fucking works. You've got a man that's immortal because his portrait ages, not him, but if he looks at his portrait, he's fucked. And you've got a vampire, and probably one of my favourites here is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you wrote this down without any prior knowledge, you'd think somebody was batshit crazy for making this. It works. This movie's set in 1989, and we get opened up to the villain of this movie, the Phantom. Fuck me, this is a great entrance. They come rolling through in tanks, and what I love about this movie is the fact that we know what tanks are. We've seen them in photos and movies, we've read about them in history. I like when you see a movie set way back and then the next development of technology is stuff we have nowadays, but it's alien to them and it is terrifying.
There's men inside!
I don't know what it is, I just like that concept.
What in God's name is that?
I call it an automobile.
Yeah, but what is it?
The future, gentlemen.
Their fear of the unknown, yet to us watching it now, it's every day. Well, there's not tanks rolling down every day, but you get what I mean. The Phantom's whole premise is he's got tanks, and what he wants to do is create enough havoc and chaos and just put the fear in the world that he's going to become an arms dealer and start dishing these out to the countries. It's a fair premise. It's a fair goal that he's got here. You know, it's not necessarily world domination, but he wants to dominate it kind of financially and through capitalism. It definitely creates a strong premise. And to stop what he's doing, we have M. He reaches out to all of the characters, brings them together to create this team. This very much feels like the Avengers before the Avengers, if you get me. The only difference here is, and what I wish we had, was like the standalone movies leading up to it. We just kind of got landed with the Avengers. I would love to see the Alan Quatermain movie, or definitely the Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde sort of movie. I think this would have been great. Imagine this film, but it had the same sort of marketing and build up to it the way the Avengers had, it would have been an all-time great. Now, even though we don't get each of them having their own standalone movie before it, this movie alone has so much fantastic character development within it, you kind of don't need the standalones to set them up. We get introduced to these characters not all at once, they come in a little bit at a time, so they each have a moment to get brought into the movie, time to breathe, you understand their personality, and then we'll bring in somebody else. And the dynamic between the group is fascinating to watch, because some like each other, some don't, some have history.
I may have been overly rude earlier when I called you a pirate.
And I may have been overly charitable when I said I wasn't. But I try to live in the now, where the ghosts of old wrongs do not abide.
Alan Quatermain takes Tom Sawyer under his wing to teach him about sharpshooting. You know, you've got Captain Nemo, where not everyone respects his ship. Alan Quatermain does, but not everyone else seems to. So there is dynamics growing all over this group. That being said, they're all here for one goal: to save the world. One aspect I didn't remember until I rewatched it was, see when they introduce like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he is in Mr. Hyde's form.
I don't see what we need a big monkey for.
Well, this big monkey has terrorized the Rue Morgue for months. Imagine the mayhem he'll give the enemy.
Like, when we first see him, he is Mr. Hyde. He's tearing up the city. You would expect it to be Dr. Jekyll, and then the big reveal is when he uses his powers, you know, takes his potion, and then he's huge and he's a terrifying hulking monster. But no, we see him as Mr. Hyde, and then he comes down to Dr. Jekyll, and then we kind of get almost like a second introduction.
Dr. Jekyll, at your service.
You know, we see what he's capable of, and then we get introduced to the man behind the power. That was a great choice. Like, they would have very easily been able to just bring him in and then have him do like that Hulk moment. You know, when he's always angry and the powers are there. But no, we see him at his full potential, and then we see the man behind it. I just loved that flip on it. The effects in this movie hold up surprisingly well. Like, to a T in a lot of ways. The most notable effects were on the Invisible Man. For most of the movie, he's cutting about in a duster, and then when he wants to be seen, he'll paint his face white. And in a lot of moments, it's not his full face that gets painted, it's maybe just the front of it, but you can then see the kind of inside it. You know that optical illusion where an ornament's inside out, but if you rotate it, it looks like it's coming out at you? It's like that in the movie. And it doesn't waver. Like, it holds up. There's a moment, and it is so minor, I know. They're in a cave at the end of the movie, and Invisible Man's about to enter it, and you can see his head duck under the cave entrance. You didn't need to do that. You could have had him just walk in. You could have had the shot where the cave entrance was a bit taller than him, and he just moves in naturally. But instead, they took the moment to make him dip, and you can just see it. It looks awesome. That being said, there is also an attention to detail missing in this movie. Notably, Quatermain's grave is misspelled. You'd think a detail like that they're going to fucking nail. Like, have somebody just proofread it, considering it's the only word on the fucking grave. The film is a little all over the place with attention to detail granted, but where it works, it works. Hyde looks incredible. You know, they've used camera trickery and put on prosthetics on him. However, he does then fight somebody who's then CG. That looks a bit janky, but that's fine. It's brief, we get Hyde for most of the movie, so it's acceptable. Nemo's ship looks straight out of a PS2 cutscene, and I don't say that as a bad thing. Given the time, it looks awesome. Like, it looks so clean and fresh. I loved his ship. How he's navigating it through the canals of Venice, I don't fucking know. These people are super. He knows what he's up to. Now, this movie also dials up a further notch, because not only do you have a team of kind of outcasts and misfits coming together, you've got their dynamic growing over the movie and seeing how they connect against a bigger threat, you also have an internal threat. Somebody is up to something. Someone's collecting data and we don't quite know who it is. So you've got the bigger threat, you've got the internal threat, and you've got a colourful collection of characters. Let's just be real for a minute. See, with all that, it sounds like a lot. It is really not. Like, the movie's pacing here is perfect. There's no point where you feel like a scene dragged on more than it had to. You know, it didn't serve any purpose. And at the same time, nothing feels rushed. Now, although they might not be against each other as enemies, there's still conflict in the team, and that comes through naturally. It's understandable as well. You've got Tom Sawyer. He's an American Secret Service agent coming over, and now he's got to work alongside a vampire, for example.
They told me European women had funny ways. You missed a spot.
There's going to be some questions. There's going to be a little bit of uncertainty around this. Character motivations as well are all over the place. Some are selfish heroes like the Invisible Man, whereas Quatermain just wants to be left alone, but he'll do it for Britain. What I also loved as well is that there's a clear trust in the team. They come up with a mission and they treat it very much like a mission. They all have their individual objectives to save the world at the end of the day. I won't go into the specifics of it, but we follow a couple of characters who need to get way across to the other side of this place. They see some people in need and they call out the fact that that is not their job. It sucks, but someone else on the team's job is to save that person, so they just turn and leave.
Scientists.
They are from Nemo.
So not only does that emphasise that they're working as a unit, but they trust in each other as well and have came up with a plan. This film deserved so much more than it had, and it deserves people still talking about it, I feel. Especially in the day and age where the MCU has been fucking milked beyond belief. It's this sort of film that just works. Through the characters all coming from their own stories and literature, they all have their own references, you know, within their own story. In this movie, they talk about Van Helsing, they talk about Sherlock Holmes. Imagine this world just expanding more and more. Now this looked great then. I thought it was really good then with all the production hell it had. No, one of the scenes there was terrible weather, so they had to move on to somewhere else, but the studio weren't budging on a release date, so everything started getting rushed and ramped up. And weirdly, this end product wouldn't have you think that the production was awful, but then when you read the stories and you look it up after the fact, it was a fucking tough time. You know, not just Sean Connery, there were a few people working in the cast and crew that gave up on movies, cinema, comic books, whatever it may be, because they had an awful time here. Like, if you watch this movie, you're going to come away with a favourite character, and mine is definitely going to be Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde. The way in which they depict it though, because his story isn't just about being angry, it's about kind of like the monster within you, and what you are capable of if you just let yourself succumb to it. And they fucking nailed that here. Given that he is one character in a huge cast, like everybody though, they get their time to shine, they get their development, and they get their arcs. His just stands out to me. It was great. There's one scene when he's running down the ship and he can see the reflection of Hyde as well, and it was terrific.
You've known what I was about each time you drank the formula.
Liar! I'm a good man. A good man!
Who's lying now? You want it. Even more than you want her.
No!
You can't shut me out forever.
It's not just like himself being angrier, it's like another personality within him that he's talking to. And he is clearly so conflicted in using this. He's created something incredible, which can let him do amazing things, but with the same note, he doesn't want to do it. He can't let it fall into enemy hands as well. It just feels like now, given that the MCU was so huge and it just managed to make billions, that people are looking back and pulling from comic books to create their own stories. There's comic book stories coming out all the time. There kind of always has been, but not as prevalent as now. I think if you're going to look back, look into the past and pull something out from modern day, this is where to start. I thought the aesthetic in the film was incredible. Given the time period as well, you're going to get it looking a bit dated, and it just worked. Like, this movie is gorgeous throughout, and it helps that it uses a lot of practical effects, you know, in the action scenes. And fuck me, I forgot about the action. The action's great. We get to see each of the characters using their own powers in the action in this movie. You know, there can be a lot of people, just a lot of fodder coming at them. You know, the Phantom has sent his troops out, and we get to see why each of them is special very clearly in the action scenes. And not only that, we then get to see them working together in the same action scene, you know, to show what kind of combinations they can make. It feels almost like Chrono Trigger with their tech systems. You know, you can get 2 or 3 together and create bigger attacks. It is fucking awesome. After watching this movie, I just wanted to sit down and talk about it. So, have you seen The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? Is this a franchise or a name that you want to see brought back into modern day? Let me know. I'm personally all for it. I'm gunning for it. I'll sign any petitions that there may be for it, you name it. And if you've made it this far and you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. It'd be so much appreciated, and you really are going to make my day here. But with all that being said, as always, thank you so much for watching.